I'm doing pretty good. This is Michael Sola on the line as well.
Hi, Michael. I'm Laurie.
Hi, Laurie. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. This is nothing. This is awesome. This is tell me something before we get online and everybody can hear. Do you have a P surname in your any of your birth certificates?
P surname? What do you mean by that?
A surname that starts with a P?
No.
Do you?
No, I don't.
What about R?
Yes.
Okay, go with the R. I smudged and prayed over it.
Yeah, I mean, the surname, would be on my father's side.
There you go.
If that's the correct information I have.
It is. I don't have visions and dreams about things that are realistic. I couldn't tell if it was a P or an R, but yeah. Go with that. There you go. I know weird things. Ask Scott.
Good or bad?
Good. Yeah, good. Good things.
Okay.
Good things are coming your way.
Oh, I hope so. It's been a long road, and I've met a lot of good people, though, and that's one thing, if I could continue, I would, just because of the people I've met.
Wow.
Yeah, good people.
I guess somebody just joined.
Yeah. Is that Esperanza?
Yes, it is.
Hey,
Hi, it's Laurie.
Hi, how are you, Laurie?
I'm good. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Pretty peachy. It's gorgeous here in Cincinnati. It's like 55 degrees.
Oh, you guys have some good weather down there.
Yes, we did. We had such a cold snap, and then last night the rain came and thunderstorms, and the insects bring the weather. Yay! They brought some good weather for us.
Well, we have cold weather up here. I'm jealous.
No, where are you exactly?
I'm in Michigan, just about 45 minutes from the Detroit area.
Oh, so you're up there. Is Joanne near there, Scott? I know she's in Michigan.
Yeah,
in that part of Michigan?
She's in southern Michigan, around Ann Arbor.
Okay, she's a little west.
Yeah, that's where Carlson lives, too, Ann Arbor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I knew that. I didn't know how far Joanne was from him. Man, I'd be on his doorstep, knocking on his door every day.
It's 70 degrees here.
Where are you?
South Carolina. Yeah.
God, the Carolinas are beautiful. What are you having, Scott?
It's about 65, 70 degrees here, too. Sunny.
Oh, you boogers. Well, Esperanza, they got to eat.
They do. I'm very jealous. You guys have the best. And I know it is in the climate. I lived there in the beach area just for about a year when I was a teenager, so I know that it was really nice there. I want to go ahead and start the show. If everybody's we're going to start the recording process, and we're going to go live in about 3 minutes, I would say.
I'm having a hard time
Work as far as talking goes. Do we just let one person finish and then you know what I mean? I don't want to be interjecting. I'm going to listen and take notes while Michael talks.
People can, just type in if you want to, you just kind of let the other person lead. And if, Scott and I usually, when we do an interview or we have a show, it's pretty easy. We kind of let each other speak. Give each other words.
If somebody types the question, will you let me know, Scott or Esperanza? Just because I don't have a laptop, I'm in the garage having a cigarette and my lunch.
I'm having a hard time hearing Esperanza.
You probably will not be able to hear me that greatly until we get live on the show, because we go live on the show because I'm on speakerphone. So when we go live, it'll be a little bit better because the speaker will be a little closer to me. because I have to put this gear on so everything be recorded.
Gotcha. So do we get disconnected? Is this a situation that happens? That we sometimes get disconnected?
If it does get disconnected, you can always dial right back into the line. It's not really going to that much, but you can always go right back into the line.
So we just dial the same number again?
Yes. No one's going to be calling this line number right now because, I was seeing that people call in, so this is much, just for the show right now.
Okay. Well, my questions are answered. Scott, do you want to say a little prayer before we begin?
Sure.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Oops. Hang on just a second. Okay. Dokohiro hiiro isachihi mi isake kilanewa isa luz mi isake aku kikitone ki isa na luz amahine wasatasami atimato wasatasami ikwalak wa ikwalak heokawami akutiyati amahina akinase kimekina asiko minehi asiko hukmiesa asiko.
Praise the ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, well, I want to let everyone know that we are recording now, and we're going into the live show. I want to welcome everyone to Native Voices United. Today we have Scott Collins with us and Laurie Tabor, as well as two brothers that are in search of their birth family. And I would like to just remind everyone that all of our shows are recorded for your convenience. So if you can't stay in with us for the whole presentation or the whole show today, just make sure that you come back and you check in with us because it is recorded for your convenience. And Scott, I want to welcome you to the show and thank you for coming out.
Hello. How are you doing, Esperanza?
Doing pretty good. Hanging in there.
This is going to be a really interesting show, and Michael Sola has a really interesting and complex story to share. He knows his language from a young age. It's something that stayed with him. He's had questions about exactly which language it comes from, and there have been people that have helped him along the way to try and locate his birth family and which Indian tribe that he actually comes from. I wanted Laurie Tabor to be a part of the interview as well because there's a little surprise that she's going to talk about regarding someone who might be able to help Michael in tracking down these records that he knows about and trying to figure out what's actually written on these birth records. Sometimes they put special code numbers on these records that tie them all together if there are multiple records, and this creates a paper trail that hopefully with the help of Laurie's friend we might be able to provide some more answers for Michael. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Michael. Right now his name is Michael Sola. He's from South Carolina. And Michael, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you very much. How are you, Scott?
Pretty good. Well, Michael, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you started doing this search for your birth family?
Yes, I can. I was born in 1967. We really don't know where. All the information that I have, there was me, my brother, and a young girl. didn't like as a young boy. They put me on a lot of medications because they thought I was out of control, which really boiled down to just being a young boy who liked to play outside, and really I used to run through the woods, play along the rivers quite a bit, and they thought that was strange. I left home when I was 13. I didn't really question anything about who I was. We were all under the impression that we were Spanish children, and when I was older, I lost contact with my brother for 23 years. 3 to 4 years ago, I found my brother living in Florida, and I was heading that way on a family vacation, and I contacted him. Not knowing, I could never get a hold of him. I've always called the Solas, asked where he was. They would tell me they didn't know. He was somewhere. They just had no clue. And when he would call them and ask, they would do the same thing by telling him that I was out of the country, which I wasn't. I was still in the same place that I grew up in, which was up in Vermont. We had moved as a family to Vermont. I stayed there. They knew exactly where it was. For some reason, they kept us apart. When I called my brother to make sure it was him, I basically came out and I asked him, I said, hey, how's my Spanish brother? And he said, I need to stop you right there. I need to talk to you. If you don't want to talk to me, then let me talk to your wife. I then said, I thought this was going to be a bad conversation. I said, whatever you have to say, you can say. I understand. It's been almost 24 years since I've seen you or talked to you. I've traveled around basically the United States. He said, Mom told me when I left, if you wanted to know who we were, and when I walked out the door and ran away from home 2 years after you did, that we were American Indian children. He never really thought about it. He just kind of shrugged it off and took off and went cross country. My brother did end up on Pine Ridge for, I think, 8 years, and basically went from Pine Ridge to the Mescalero, or the Hickory, if I'm saying that right, Apaches, and was told that along the way that he was Apache. That was just a hearsay thing. When I started researching with my wife is a very smart person on the computer. I started researching because I was very confused by family history. When my wife started researching all the paperwork that my foster father had sent because I needed the birth certificate to get on a cruise ship, she found out that there were several places to get that birth certificate, but most of all what she found out was that there was no information regarding me and my brother. That everything she found, we went to the extent, just to let people know, to call every single person on the paper trail that we had, and nobody, the only words I got out of them was, no, we're sorry, very polite people, good luck, but no, we don't know anything. I continued on my journey, and I told my brother along the way that I remember, and I thought I was crazy, and I went to counseling for it, but I said, it's almost like a language. Talk to the foster sister. And I said, I remember this. And she said, yeah, when you were a child, you would always speak in the language that Mom and Dad had no clue what it was, and what they called the adoption agency, they would always tell them, just tell the boy to speak English, and he will speak English. Now, knowing that what's on my records is that we spoke fluent Spanish, my father was from Argentina, my foster father. He knew Spanish up and down. His children did. His parents did. And he said it was definitely not any Spanish at all. They did not know what it was. They were kind of afraid for their children because they had no clue what I was saying. They ended up bringing me into basically, a shrink, I guess you could say, a person who, wanted to ask me about my life. I cannot remember all the way up to the age of 9 or 10. I just have no memory, nor does my brother. I started following, and with help from a friend of mine, more like a brother to me, Tommy Youngblood, and his wife Luta, and a lady up north who I call grandmother, a Lakota lady. I started really looking at the possibility I might have been robbed, and I didn't know what to do. So I started really focusing on what I knew inside my head and the things I used to do, and so did my brother. And it basically boiled down to I just just shut my mouth. And, I told my brother told me, he says, if you don't believe me, you do me a favor. He says, you find a powwow somewhere, and you don't say nothing, and you just walk. He says, don't say a word. It's okay. He says, let the people decide, and you'll know. It was automatically, the minute I closed my mouth and did not speak, that I had multiple people from Florida to Vermont, even old co-workers that I worked for many years for, said, we all knew that you were American Indian. It was you that was saying you weren't. Everybody else knew. So the information I have, that, because I deal with a lady from the Split Feather Society, and she's pulled records, said there is no information. It's like they gave you a false identity, but we're not 100% sure. That the records start really from the time you were at Foundling Hospital, you were being basically checked for medical history. What was, did you have a crooked feet? Did you have were you deaf in one ear? Those type of things. Before that, there is nothing. I've heard a lot of stories. I've dealt with a lot of people on this journey. I've met a lot of good people, very helpful people, Scott being one of them. Joanne Spotted Bear, who really kicked this off for me, along with other people. It's been one of those journeys that I just, I really want to say at this time, thank you for everything everybody's done.
Well, you're definitely welcome, and I think that that's part of what many of us do, with our research, family research and history research into the tribes that we go back to and other tribes that are a part of our history. You had said that Foundling Hospital was one of the places that you had gone to, you and your brother had gone to. What was the name of the other orphanage that y'all had been at, and also what are the locations of Foundling Hospital and this other orphanage?
The other one that me and my brother were talking about that we really couldn't put a finger on, and I think I had mentioned it to a couple friends, was either Saint Marie or Saint Anne's or Saint Joseph, one of those, something along that line. We know that we started off in an orphanage in New York. This all took place in New York City, which made it very strange to me as an adult man. I am 47 years old, and I always look at things very clearly as an adult man, really what happened. And when I start looking back, I start seeing the fact that basically we don't remember, and everything that my parents and Solas had told us was wrong. Our mother that we know of was 13 years old when she had me. That's been established when she was 13 or 14 years old. And then my brother came almost 10 months later. I was born in 67 of January. He was born in November of 67. So there's not a big span there. But the problem that bothered me the most was that they were saying that the man that was involved was in his, early 20s, 23, 24, which to me sounded very strange. There are, we were told we were abused children, we were ripped out of the home, but when I started researching, there was no medical history showing anything of any abuse. It actually states that we were very healthy children, that there was nothing wrong with us. And that's really, to me, what set things off was that I had been lied to. And at that time, I became very angry and didn't really know how to handle the situation. And really, with help from people, Native people, really showed me how to control what was inside me. And that's what I needed to do, to take a step back. Say, okay, this has happened. Now, what are you going to do about it? And that's what brings me here today. I've walked on my road for not a very long time, but I also, at this point in my life, realized that, even if I don't find anybody, at least I know that I paid honor to our ancestors and prayed to them in a traditional way so that I could find my way home. Whether this is the answers that I'm getting now, because it seems to me it comes very fast. I've been with Tommy Youngblood and his wife to different, not to the reservation, but talking to people on different reservations, and it's all led me back to basically where my brother originally started, and that was basically on the reservation. You know, he started off his journey at the Pine Ridge Reservation, where everybody, even the Apache people were saying, no, that sounds, because of the language you know, like a plain language. So I really believe my tie to whoever we are is within that language, and that this paper trail basically needs to just stop, and you need to go forward with that, because somebody's going to know your face, somebody's going to know who you are, and that's what everybody said. So basically that's where I'm at today.
Now, when you were telling me the other day that one of the things that you and your brother had been told is that the abuse that supposedly had happened was that your brother's arm had been broken and that your head had been bashed, and you went and you cut your hair or something, and you went to the doctor, and they said that you had never had this head injury, they said, and tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, when, you know, the Solas have told us a lot of things. Now, I'm going to remind you, because I don't speak ill will of anybody, that the Solas were very young when they adopted us. I believe that David was in his early 20s, and he had 2 children. They couldn't have any more children, and they wanted boys. So they ended up going and adopting basically 2 boys, and then all of a sudden, at the end of ready to sign the paperwork, they came in and said, oh, wait a minute, there's a girl too. So they took all 3, and then down the road they actually had their own son. We were told that we were abused children with broken arms, smashed in head, and that's why we were ripped away from our mother. But when I started looking at basically up north, I used to wear my hair really short, and I started looking with my wife for scars, because I was always told you have a scar on your head, so does your brother. We don't have scars on our head. I had talked to my brother. I said, feel about your hips being broken or your leg or anything? He said, no. He said, the only thing I remember is I fell off a horse when I was a child. I said, I remember that, but I don't remember what had happened. All I know is that you were, it's almost like I could see him as a small child sitting on a horse with somebody next to him holding him, and I remember walking by a horse, whether I touched him or did whatever, he ended up falling off. That's the other thing that to me was very strange, is when I was adopted, I actually was very much into horses for some reason, and like David Sola thought that was a good outlet. We're gonna get you a riding instruction. And I went to the rider instructor, and I sat on a horse, and I took off. She turned around and told my father he doesn't need to learn how to ride a horse. He's good at riding. He knows how to ride. He knows what he's doing at a very young age. There are no physical marks on my body from any abuse. There are none on my brother. So we know that was not true. There is nothing that states that we were abused children. And really, that's an issue with me, because for many years I've held resentment that I was, basically beat up as an infant. But there's no proof of that.
You would. I'm sorry to interject. You would have scars. I have 5 children, and just from one stitch, my son has a scar on his head, and you would have a visible physical remnant if you had a head injury of that magnitude.
Yeah, and they said both of us boys did. The other thing that because my brother really, in my eyes, is a very humble man. He speaks very clearly, and he's pretty much is a thinker. Where I was pretty much would use my hand instead of anything else. And we were talking. He says, all the signs to who you were was there. You just never looked at them. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by that? And he started telling me a story, which I remember, about us up north. When we were little children, how I had gotten this bow and arrow given to me by one of our neighbors, and you sat next to me in the house, he said, in the backyard, and he told me, he said, you see the squirrel in the tree? And I said, I remember that. And I told him, I said, you see that squirrel in the tree? Well, I'm going to get it, I'm going to eat it. And he laughed. He said, you were so young, and it's just one of my favorite stories. I remember you shooting a squirrel out of the tree with a bow, and I could not believe it. But he says, the signs have always been there for you. It's just you've never looked. He says, I need you to start looking. And I have. My brother is very comfortable in his own skin, which I'm very proud of him. I mean, it's been 24 years. We live a long ways. I was up north, he was in Florida. He's actually my neighbor now, so we live right next door to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, it's but the problem that I had with that is that now I feel like, and he feels the same way, that foster family really has monitored what we're doing. The girl, the oldest daughter, who I'm pretty close with, she actually did write a letter to us, and basically she said, Spanish, but she said, you definitely are not Spanish children. You're definitely Native American. And then that was it. And we haven't heard a peep out of her. She has told me that she's tried to talk to the father, and every time she does, he basically starts to tear up. So somewhere near he knows, and we have been told by the mother to please don't hold any grudges or ill will against us. And I don't. I mean, I did, I'll be honest, but I don't now, because I know that the way our society is, our government, what can happen to people.
Yes.
So is your sister that was adopted with you, is she still in your life?
No, she actually was killed when she was 12 years old by a drunk driver. So we have nothing on her.
Esperanza, can you interject here for a moment and tell us a little bit about Scoop 60?
Well, Scott, I just want to say that there is a book that I read some time ago, and I talked about this often. And this was about children that were taken from Canada, and they were shipped over to the United States. Now, most often they were sent into white middle-class families that couldn't have children or had some problems with having children. And a lot of these kids went through so much, and they never knew that they were natives from Canada. They just didn't know. So the book that I read is called The Dispossessed. Do you know this book? Has anybody read this book?
No.
I haven't.
It's called by Gregory York. And this is one of the best books I've ever read. One of my professors back some years ago had me read it for one of my courses. And this book really explains how many children from Canada were swooped away from Indian families and brought over to the United States. Now, they were First Nations children and Métis children. And there's still kids, from the 60s that are still wandering around here in the United States, and they have no idea that they are, from Canada. They just don't know. And a lot of these adoptions were basically illegal. And what would happen would be, like, say an Indian mom would have a child and the parents would come down. They'd fly them in from the reserve, because the reserves oftentimes are really far away from the metro areas. So they'd fly them in from the reserve to go to the hospital and have the baby. They'd have the baby at the hospital and then tell the parents that there were some problems with the baby, and that, the mom and dad could go on home, and that they would call them when it would be time to pick the baby up. When the parents would call and check and find out what was going on with alarming rate that the United States, this is one of the reasons the Indian Child Welfare Act went into place. And it's a shame now because most Métis and First Nations children that do come here to the United States, they have no type of protections here in the United States. There are some border states like Washington and things like that that put down protections for First Nations and Métis children under the Indian Child Welfare Act in their state. But other than that, there's no protections whatsoever, and this should be something that needs to be looked at. Now, when kids come over here with their parents, even with their natural parents, and they come over under the J Treaty, and the United States starts exercising rules over them through the state that they live in, these children do not have protections as federally recognized tribal members do. So this is something that really needs to be dealt with, and I really think that, something has to be done. And the main reason why this Indian Child Welfare Act took place is to make sure that children were not swooped away from their parents and put into foster care and things like this. I mean, trying to put the pieces together after years of being lost is really difficult. And a lot of people, they don't feel the hope that many do when they're searching for their birth parents, because they just feel like a lifetime of abuse that went on. I mean, I read some of these stories, real life stories that were taking place in this book called The Dispossessed, and a lot of these kids, like this one girl, she was Métis and she was lost on the East Coast in Maine, and I believe Massachusetts, and she lived in Connecticut. She was up and down the East Coast with different families. She was shipped all around, put into psychological care, from one psychiatrist to the next, shipped off to many different homes. But in the first home that she was in, she was like 3 or 4. She remembered her family back in Canada, but, basically she was given everything that she wanted, clothes, shoes, the top education and everything like that. But her father was sexually abusing her. So when she got to a certain age and the mother found out about it, she basically put her on the street and didn't want anything to do with her. So, I mean, they abandoned her. And she was a prostitute. I mean, there was just so many different things that happened to this young girl. But she was able to eventually get back to her family in Saskatchewan.
Not to interrupt, but it's pretty funny that you're telling me this story, because one of the things that I was told by my sister Karen, my foster sister, was that the Solas were asked by the judge at the adoption, will you sign this piece of paper so that these children will never ask where they come from or who they are? David apparently said absolutely not. Whether he did or not, I don't know. I know that we were put on a program on TV at a very young age, and we're told to just smile, that our hair was cut, and basically that's, some of the information I get comes from the foster sister. She hasn't given me anything lately. I don't know why. I don't know if they've told her that people stop talking to us. I don't know. I've tried to call her. And one of the things that bothers me the most is that when I talked to the Solas the last time, and it's been many years, the last thing they said to me was, we want you to change your name. We want you not to be a Sola anymore. And that kind of bothers me. So, and I told them point blank, tell me what my name is, and I'll, I have no problems. But they would not respond to that. I know that the adoption, according to the Solas, was a very botched adoption. It happened very quickly. I only met the Solas, I think, for maybe half hour. I don't remember being in New York. When I talked to my brother, he had said this thing, because we had a long talk about this about a month and a half ago, that he remembered being there. He was very scared of the buildings. And I said, yeah, I remember being there. I was scared of the noise. But I don't remember being there very long. But I don't remember before that. And he doesn't. So that's, it's just the stories, to me, some of times are almost familiar. There was a lot of stuff going on with that family, the foster family, where the girls in that family were being all molested by the grandfather. And that came out a couple years ago. I mean, it was a very different type of family. And, you know, he ruled that house in a very religious. Everything he did, he had his Bible in his hand. Whether, you know, the school, when we went to school, and finally were enrolled in school in Vermont, the teachers many years later had come up to me and said, you know, we're sorry we never did anything. Basically, a lot of people believe we're being abused. I actually was given money from our neighbor one time, who was a very elderly man, and started crying and said, I'm sorry that I couldn't stop your father, but he was bigger than me. And I told him, I said, you know what, that's fine. You know, I mean, but he was a very, in my eyes, very abusive. And when I talked to him about it, he basically told me, no, you're putting my face on somebody else's body. I never touched you, kid. So that's what led me to run away from home. I didn't run away because I was, you know, wanting to do whatever. I ran away because of, in my eyes, you know, laying on a table and being beaten. That to me was, that's why I left. And, you know, I made it. I mean, I've been a plumber now for 29 years. You know, I made my own life. I didn't have to ask or borrow or anything like that. And I'm pretty proud of who I am. So, you know, whatever they have to deal with, those are their own things that they need to deal with. Mine are mine and my brother. And I hope someday to go home. I hope someday to be my brother, you know, stand up proud and tall that we now know.
When you were talking about the Split Feather Society, can you tell us a little more about the Split Feather Society and what they've been able to find for you?
Yeah, there's a lady by the name of Tracy, and she and I started talking not too long ago. I had contacted her to ask her to help. Told her I wasn't a rich man. I know a lot of these organizations is money, and we started talking. And I called her on the phone. And she started telling me basically the same story that I just heard. But she was talking within our own state that in 1960 there was a thing going on in Maryland where they would go and swoop up basically anywhere from 15 to 20 children off different reservations, and they would all end up in Maryland. She said what she found very strange is that David's father was from Maryland, that he might have heard that there was children for adoption, and, you know, basically had told him, and he might have looked into it, and they said, okay, yeah, we have some children that are close to you, because they lived in Rochester, New York at the time. She had also told me stories about how this has been going on for a long time, that there are a lot of children walking this earth who are indigenous people who don't even know and don't have a clue who they are. And to me, that's very sad that, you know, and I don't want to say anything wrong, but it's, in my eyes, it's like almost, it has never ended, that they're still trying to wipe out a race. And if we take these children and get rid of them and give them new identities and tell them that I met a Lakota lady that was adopted into a black family, and she thought she was black, had a skin disorder. And these are the things that are happening to the children. I mean, and it's not just, you know, Native children, it's children, period. And that's the saddest part to me, is that, you know, you grow up and you don't know anything. All you know is that you're alive. All you know is that you might have a sibling here. And that's really it. And, you know, it's just me and my brother now. I mean, that's it. You know, me and my brother and our families, and that's it. Other than that, there is, you know, nobody else around us. And that's why everybody I meet, I call him brother, I call him sister, grandpa, because they're my family now. And that's how I've always looked at it. And, you know, the society has really helped because they have researched who me and my brother, they have taken docket numbers from papers that I have that have come up with the same thing. Nothing. They have forwarded to other people. Nobody has a clue what happened, except that this was going on all the way up where I was told to the Bill Clinton administration when they were asked to stop it. It was the federal government going in, taking children off reservations, putting them up for adoption, dropping them off on orphanage. They said they would stop, and what they ended up doing is hiring people to just take these children and drop them off in orphanages, give them new identities. And I asked Tracy about that. I said, well, what about this? Because I wouldn't believe a word of information you got, period, because it just doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense. They can do whatever they want. They can rewrite your whole life. And that's the problem. And I think that's a very big issue that needs to stop. I mean, everybody has a life. Everybody has a family. Everybody's got a mom and dad. Walk through life not knowing who you are is very difficult. It's one of the biggest challenges I've ever had in my life. I have 7 grandchildren. I have, children. To look them in the eye, for them to come up to me and say, Dad, who are you? I sit there and look them in the eye and go, I don't know. Try doing that. That's hard to do.
And how many birth certificates were found for you?
4. There was actually 4. My wife had punched up the birth certificates because I needed a birth certificate to go on a cruise because I was leaving the country and I needed an ID. I never had one. And she found 4, 2 in New York, 1 up in Vermont, and 1 out west somewhere. I asked her this morning since she wasn't really sure where the other one was. She said you were listed 4 different places under that name. We also know, too, that at a young age, and I have that information, it shows that I was in New Hampshire before the adoption at a hospital being checked in, but nobody knows who checked me in and nobody knows who signed me out. That I was brought there because I was sick. For some reason, before the Solas had adopted me, I ended up in New Hampshire, and then I ended up in New York. To me, that sounds like a child that's traveling. That someone...
Yes.
But there's no... And I have that information, but there is no paperwork stating who signed me in and who signed me out.
This is what makes me think that your family may be, your birth family may be in Canada, because a lot of these kids that were being brought over here were shuffled through the East Coast. And this is one of the reasons why I was saying, to Scott, this may be, a 60 scoop type of dilemma here, because of the fact that your birth year, you guys were born in the 60s. This was something that was happening at an alarming rate. They were bringing over First Nations and Métis children at an alarming rate. I mean, this is something that was happening a lot back in the days when you guys were born. So I can only surmise exactly with you guys being on the East Coast, Vermont, New York, these things like that really point to, the 60 scoop. I mean, this is what it sounds like to me. And with you not having any information, because you wouldn't have these birth certificates and things available, or any other, background information if you were brought in from Canada.
Right, and it's funny you say that, because what's really odd is that the birth certificate that the Solas had sent me was a piece of paper from a copy machine that says the city of New York, are not liable for any false information found on his birth certificate. But then you really can't read any names or times or anything like that. We could make out the house number, and we researched the house number, and it came back that that street address did not exist. We also been talking to Tracy from the Split Feathers. She had told me that New York City was one of the largest areas for Native American children being put into foster care and adopted out. That it was, I think, an open adoption. And that's where I really started looking at, children in New York City and how many, Native American children were being pushed through. She said it was basically a lot of the majority of the large cities. New York was definitely one of them. And that's where we were.
Wow, it's unbelievable that we're sitting here in 2013 and still we don't have any answers for your family. And you only can go by the materials that you have available to you, or that's available that you look up online. You know what I mean? So, I about the language. Now, was it you or was it your brother that spoke this language that no one knew, the real?
Okay. Here's the second part. First part. Second part. My brother, when we were talking on the phone when I first found him, I had gone and visited him, and my brother has never changed. He is an incredible artist, has been for some reason. It was a gift Creator gave him at a very young age, because I remember when he was a little child, the boy could draw, and he still does. Where he has kind of opened up his own little website thing where he, but it's all things he sees in his head, and if you look at it, it's all Native American. I mean, everything he does, from paintings to drawings, is stuff that's in his head. He had told me about who we were and what his thoughts were, and I called him when I got back from a vacation, and I said, listen, I need to talk to you. I just want to let you know that for many years, I thought I was crazy, and I had these voices in my head. And he said, what's going on? I said, I think I remember. And I started speaking to him. He goes, yeah, that's it, but I don't know what it is. I said, yeah, Karen, our foster said, yeah, that's what you used to do. That's what you did when you were a child. I have talked to a lot of people who believe that there are two different languages. It could be one language, just the words are not being pronounced correctly, because it's been 36 years since I've opened my mouth. My brother, and I had to really think about this, that he doesn't remember, but Sola said he would respond every time I would say something. He would respond to it. And it was funny that that was being said, because I watched my grandchildren the other day, and my granddaughter's 3 years old, 3 and a half, speaks very well. But she could tell her little brother, let's go upstairs and clean up the toys, and he'll go and he'll respond to that. But he won't open his mouth because he doesn't know what to say. He can't speak yet. Very few words. And I started looking at that going, I bet you that's what happened. I bet you that I might know, and he might understand, but he can't really speak. And I think he's blocked that out because that was a bad time in our life. I mean, I'm looking at, if I was to sit my son down, or my daughter, and say, you know what, stop speaking English. Don't do that. That's bad. You would stop. But for some reason, it never laughed. And I thought, to be honest, I thought it was crazy. I mean, because I would be at work, and being a plumber, sometimes you get a little mad, and, things don't go right. You're on a job site, a bunch of people, and I would get mad, and I'd just start rambling off. That's what are you doing? Lay down enough and forget it. And I actually went to counseling. I would go to counseling, and counselors would say, we don't know what to tell you. What are we supposed to do about it? Just stop it. It's like, well, that's what I've been told my whole life. My brother and I have tried. We have worked very hard. I have with Tommy Youngblood to talk to different people in his group of friends, his circle of friends. They have all been very helpful. They have all pointed us in a direction. And basically, when I talked to Trace from Split Feathers, she said, I'm going to have somebody listen to this. And it was a Lakota lady. She said, no, it doesn't sound Lakota, it sounds Dakota, or Nakota, something like that. I then talked and called, because I monitor Facebook. I don't stay on Facebook. But there's certain people I like to see what they say. One of them being Joanne Spotted Bear. I called her on the phone. I said, Joanne, I need to talk to you. And we had a conversation. We started talking. She says, no, that it's not Lakota, but she might be the poem, Sioux. She says, I know a man, and that's what led me to Scott. And I have been working together with a friend of Scott's to determine what this is. We did a recording, we sent it off, and it has come back so far that it looks in the direction of Dakota Sioux. Just by correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, a linguist.
Yeah, Dr. Robert Rankin, he's a Siouan linguist, and his response to the recording, his first response to the recording is that it sounded like the N dialect, which is Nakota, and that it was possibly Yanktonais or Assiniboine. And And then his second response the other day is just a general response saying Dakota Sioux, which is Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota are all part of the Dakota Sioux. So that's a pretty good solid affirmation about where the language comes from, because Dr. Rankin is like a preeminent Siouan linguist. He's been teaching linguistics and attending conferences about Siouan language for many, many years. In fact, I believe that he's retired from full-time work at the university, but I think he still does teach ever so often. But he is one of the leading Siouan linguists in the United States, and his opinion has some weight behind it. But it's not done yet. I mean, I still want to. I'm probably going to send him a message asking him if he could maybe pass the recording along, and I think maybe we might try to make another recording and just kind of get some various opinions from other Siouan linguists as well, to see if we can get that narrowed down to be more specific about which tribe and maybe even which reservation.
Well, I just want to say that there are 9 Dakota bands in Canada today. There's 4 in the Saskatchewan and 5 in Manitoba.
Wow.
Well, let me ask you something, Esperanza. Is it possible that you might know someone that is in touch with a linguist in Canada?
I wouldn't know anybody. I'm not going to say I wouldn't know anybody, because I might, because I have a lot of friends everywhere. So I'm not going to say that. If anyone out there is listening to us here today, and you know anyone that's in the Saskatchewan or Manitoba area that would have contact with any of the 9 Dakota bands there, please let me know. If you could Facebook message me or send me a message on my email, which is up on Facebook. If you could do either one, or just come over to the page and let me know, that would be great. Also, I just want to throw in there that there's a large Métis community also in southwest Manitoba that comes from, many of them come from these 9 different Dakota bands. So
now, real quick, because I wanted to get Laurie Tabor to come in and talk a little bit about some things that she might know. But real quick, before we do that, can you speak your language so that we can hear the language?
Being on the radio, I would love to. Okay. Yeah, well, the more the merrier. So, I mean, I've walked this journey. So, yes. Taite na wate, taite wa washo taine, wachina ite wa. Taite na ze na uto, ite wache, na utina hida. Taite te biete na ite wa, so taine, taite washo.
Great.
Wow. How fluid was that?
Yeah. And
yeah, that's not garbledy-goop. That's not something that's invented. That's something that's his core. It's a remembrance, and all of those repressed memories. Think about that. That's amazing. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I just want to let you. I posted up a link for you guys for those 9 bands that I spoke of in Canada, and I keep pressing this Canadian issue because I know what happened during the 60s, and I really want somebody, if they're in that area, to get in touch with us and let us know something. And because this is recorded, so we can pass it around to different social media outlets and things like that. So I'm going to post the link for that, Scott, for the 9 Canadian bands up on Native Voices United, so you can read about them, because they didn't have a treaty with Canada. So I think this is really, really important, because they didn't have a treaty. Just take a look, and when you get a chance, I'm just saying, Laurie or Michael or anyone else out there that's listening, take a look and read what I'm saying, what I'm read from the 9 bands, because I think it's really imperative that you take a look at that, especially when you hear these elders in different communities saying it could be the Nakota or Dakota or something like that. So I wouldn't pass. I would comb everything with a fine-tooth comb. I think this is really important that you do so at this time.
Definitely, and I think I'll also send a question out to Dr. Rankin and see. I mean, I'm sure he's got some linguist friends up in Canada, because he has linguists all around the world that he talks to. But I wanted to, real quick, kind of switch it over to Laurie to kind of. I want her to tell you guys what she told me on the phone the other night when I was talking to her about Michael.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, I was looking for a paper, actually. Interesting story. I don't think that anything that happens in our lives happens by mere coincidence. I'm not a believer in coincidences, and I really, really, really feel strongly at my core that Michael and his family found Scott and found our family for a reason. It's just a twist of fate that it happened this way. I personally have been in touch with a number of people who were adopted, who were looking for a birth family. And with the help of a just amazing woman here in Ohio, actually, she's in Ohio, Scott, found that out. She was in Michigan visiting with Joanne, our cousin. But this woman has access to records, files, and information, and she has been very assistive in helping people sort through and decipher, if you will, the exactitudes and the truths and the falsifications on various documents like birth certificates. At some point, Michael, I hope you'll contact me via email or phone, and you can give me all of the information or scan copies or email copies of those birth certificates, because those birth certificates are vital, vital tools. There are a lot of things that people can change. They can change your name. They can change your birth location. They can change your mother's name, your father's name. They can change some things on birth certificates, but from a legal perspective, there are certain codes and certain numbers legally change.
Can you say that? I'm sorry. Can you say that again? You kind of cut out.
Okay, there are pieces of information on every single human being's birth certificate that are vital, that cannot, will not, and do not change. A state code. There are certain codes, like a birth certificate. I was trying to grab mine, but I couldn't find it and get it in my hand. But what I'm saying is there are codes. Every birth certificate has a code on it. The numbers, the letters, the sequencing of them, those things are all a part of a birth certificate. And even if a birth certificate is an amended birth certificate, those things will not, cannot legally ever, ever, ever change. When children are adopted out, there are pieces of information on that amended birth certificate that are reflected from the original birth certificate. They can't change them. There's a form number, there's a district number, there's a registrar number, and there's an actual birth certificate number. There are pieces of those numbers that do not change. If you were born in Hamilton County in Ohio, you're going to have a 134, which are the first 3 digits of your birth certificate. If you're born in Butler County, Ohio, you're going to have a 138. Do you see what I'm saying? Those numbers don't change, and those numbers are big clues. And I just know that with the help of a search angel, people who do this for free, society, people who do this for a living, people who work in children's services have access to information. And I'm not saying that it's going to open up a window and you're going to see it clear as day like the sun coming up, but at least it would give you can link these 4 birth certificates together, and you can find out what the exactitudes are, what the realities are. Once the search angel sees this information, they know that you were born in this state or this township or this city or this whatever, because those do not change. When they amend a birth certificate, they are allowed and do change some of the registrant codes, but some of them they simply cannot, will not, and do not. They never change. Just like yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about search angels?
Absolutely. And I can tell you, go ahead.
I've got my information with them already.
Well, I can tell you that I know a search angel that has literally worked miracles. She has pulled something out of nothing. We didn't have a birth certificate. We didn't have anything. But if you go by dates, you go by the birth certificates that you do have, the amended ones, you look at all of that, you put it all together. It's like putting together pieces of a puzzle. And I'm just telling you that we knew nothing on 6 or 7 occasions, and honestly, these people know who they are. They now know who they are with her assistance. And it's just a matter of what you have, what you know, what you have access to, and where the records are from. I mean, those birth certificates, even though they're amended or falsified, they still have vital, key, altruistic information about your birth on them. They will.
Not a real certificate, right?
Exactly. They're amended. I'll give you an example. My daughter, Ivy's father, he had no clue who his birth father was. He didn't know. He felt it in his heart that his father was not his father. He felt it. We started digging. We contacted this lady. He showed her his wink birth certificate, which he thought was real. He thought it was his. He thought, for years. She looked at it and said, "No, it's amended. I know it's amended. The reason I know it's amended is because of da-da-da-da-da-da-da, And then she started looking, and she started digging, and it took him to Kentucky. And we found the birth family.
Wow.
He knew nothing. He didn't know a name. He didn't know nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. She did that repeatedly to numerous people, and I'm just saying there are countless search angels, amazing people. They're helpful, they're assistive, they do what they can. Some are better than others. It's like if you go to a dentist, you just got to find the right one. And I'm just telling you that I have found the right one on numerous occasions, and she has been very, very, very integral and assistive, and it's my great hope that with the information at hand, we'll get to the bottom of it. I feel very confident. I absolutely feel confident. I don't struggle. I know that this can be had, this can be gotten, this can become, altruistic for you. I think that, it didn't happen for no reason. I didn't know this lady and know Scott, and Scott contacted you through Joanne's there, and then da-da-da-da-da. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree.
I mean, it's just believable. I mean, I did make contact. I found my own blood, my own niece. I found her through this lady's assistance.
It's funny you say, birth certificate, because when I actually did receive my birth certificate in my hand, it didn't look like a normal birth certificate. It's a very strange looking birth certificate, which didn't really make any sense to us, but I had to call, my wife actually had to call customs and bring it down to the airport to make sure that it was legal. When I came to South Carolina and I applied for a job, and who knows their social security number, I really don't, so I pulled mine out of my wallet, they would not accept it. They told me that they've had many problems with those numbers on that card. So I have to have some other form of ID. So, I mean, it's just little things like that that really make me question what really happened.
Well, Esperanza's right. I mean, there are countless children, and I've talked to people. I met a firefighter who was in a hole. The hole had collapsed, and I was just driving down the road, and he was in the hole, and I ended up talking to him in this collapsed hole down the street from me, and, I just talked to him, and he was adopted. And this lady, I'm telling you, she helped him find his birth mother. She helped me. My cousin Mary did not know who her birth father was. She helped me find Mary's birth father in Florida.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
she has helped me. She has literally, she's been an angel. There's no other way to put it. She has helped me personally help. With her help, I have reunited 9 people with their birth, siblings, parents, families, whatnot. And these are people that just happened upon me. It's like, how did they find me? How did I find them? How did this happen? How did that happen? And it just transpired in that fashion. You know what you are at your core. You don't speak that language for no reason.
Right.
It's not gobbledygook. It's not something you invented. It's not something you made up. You're not mentally ill. You don't need to see a shrink. You know at your core who you are and from whence you came. And that's just the beauty of it. And there are, I'm certain, countless repressed memories, and children who are abused go through that. My background is mental health, and I get that, and my heart goes out to you for that. But you know what? This is where your journey's brought you now, and I think this is a good, safe place. And I think that, we're on our way. I think that this is the beginning of a new chapter for you.
Well, thank you.
With the help of other people, and I'm excited for you. I really am.
I thank all of you. Thank you very much.
We thank you too. Now, I just want to mention to Scott, if you have a chance to look on that link that I posted up on Native Voices United, you can see that the language and the tribal bases that you mentioned earlier are posted on that link. So I would really take a good look at that. Now remember, the Dakotas did not have a treaty with Canada. So even if they did have any type of Indian Child Welfare Act put in place in Canada, but at that time I don't think they did, they were still able to waltz off with the kids as they pleased. And they were doing it even with status communities. So that makes no difference whatsoever. So I want you to just look at that page if you can possibly, because I know that you're talking to Michael, and you guys delve into that just for a minute, and you may be able to get in touch with somebody there. I believe they also have a Facebook page. If you kind of browse through Facebook, I believe they have a Facebook page, and you may be able to get in touch with somebody on the Facebook page. Now, they're out of southwestern Manitoba area. So just take a look, because Manitoba is right next to Ontario. And Ontario is, right next to Michigan and, so much of the East Coast. So I want you to just look. Look.
Is that on the Facebook United Native Voices page or Native Voices United page, or is that on the actual radio page on the internet?
It wouldn't be on the radio page. All the links would be on our Facebook page, Native Voices United Facebook page. And I posted that on my page too, Scott, on my profile, just in case you didn't find it, because we do have other admins over there on that page that post articles, and they speak to our listeners and stuff like that too. So because there's about 3 different radio stations that are lined up with under the Native Voices United name. So we have other admins there because they have a hip hop show, and they have another little talk shows, and different things that are coming on throughout the day and things United, because that's public. So, Michael, I just want you to, if you get a chance, I think you can even look at this page from a smartphone or something like that too. So, I would really look into it, because, Scott, the names that you mentioned to me are on that page, and that makes me feel like this could be, especially with the boys being on the East Coast. If they would have been someplace else, I would have thought a little different. But being on the East Coast and knowing that there was a large population of Métis and First Nations children that were shipped to the East Coast, I would really look into it. There's another brother, and he is in Connecticut. He was on the Aboriginal People's Television Network, and he found out that he wasn't an American citizen, and he had to, I guess this is when he was applying for his passport. So, I'm thinking, if your paperwork and your Social Security number aren't, proper, then you're probably running into different problems and things like that too. So it would really, pay to look through this, because even if you're born here in the States and your parents were, or your mom was from Canada, she was living in Canada. If you were first generation born in the United States, you would automatically have Canadian citizenship. So, and then you may even, be able to register as a band member there in Canada. So I would really look into that information, because I really think, my heart is telling me that you have a connection to the people there, and I really, really feel like that. I feel like that because of where you guys were and the language base that you're speaking and the names that Scott mentioned to me when he spoke to that linguist. That makes me feel even more certain that this is where your family may be.
Yeah.
What names are you referring to, Esperanza?
Scott mentioned Assiniboine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
That's right.
Coda and Dakota and Assiniboine, all of those names are on this page. And there's 9 different bands over in Canada of Dakota peoples. So I would really, really, really look over there, especially if you're speaking this language, and there's got to be a connection somewhere. And because you guys ended up on the East Coast in New York and Vermont, this other brother that I'm speaking of, he was on the Aboriginal People's Television Network. And let me tell you, he did not have proper paperwork to get his passport. And he learned that he was a Canadian and not an American. So he had to then reapply through, he had to get his information for his band and everything, and then he had to come, and then he had to legally stay in the United States, he had to get, he had to fill out his paperwork for the J Treaty to assert his rights under the J Treaty. So I really think it's important that you look that information up, because
I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because my brother lived in Florida for a very long time, and he was telling that when he went and applied for his driver's license, something he's always had, that he lost it and reapplied for it, they would not give it to him, because when they punched up his Social Security number and his name on the computer, it came back, even though he had a birth certificate from the Solas, it came back as he did not exist, he was not in the United States. He actually had to have David Sola, and it took him about 2 months to get his license. David Sola actually had to send all the paperwork basically stating that he was adopted, and that this is who he is. They would not accept his ID, they would not accept his Social Security number, they would not accept that was his name, because they had nothing on who he was as a person, that he did not exist, that it was a false, that he was giving them false paperwork.
And this is what happened to a lot of children under the 60 scoop, because they were illegally adopted. They were not, these adoption centers were stealing the children, and they were selling them to these wealthy or upper middle class families on the East Coast. And not all the children were taken illegally. There were some that were, really adopted out, and they went through the proper channels, but the majority of the children were. And you have to remember that, and the J Treaty states that if you are 50% or more Aboriginal
your name?
No. Well, I've talked to my brother about that, and this is what he says. He said, he says, I really look at our names when we were adopted. And I said, yeah. He said, you're Michael, I'm Ivan, and was Anna. He said, who the heck, if we were Spanish children, would name their child Ivan? Just a lot of things. We were told that Ivan's name was Ivan, that my name was actually Raphael, and Anna's name was Anna. But when we sat down and talked, I told Ivan, I couldn't even spell that, and I still can't spell it. And when I was talking to him, he says, I told him, I said, I don't even remember being called that. I don't remember until we were adopted and handed, to the Sola that, you need to change your name. And that's the first thing they did. The very first thing they did is took us and changed our name. Gave us options, and through the options you've got, and you need to change your name. And that's really where it went. My brother, when I was talking to him, of course, he remembers a little bit, that he remembered being at the home in New York City, and that the lady there told him, while she was talking to him, because he was a very quiet child, that he was American Indian. That you and your brother are American Indian. And he said, I remember that. I remember Mom telling me that. He says, I don't remember these names. I don't remember them. We actually, what my wife did, because she said, you know what, I'm going to try to find out. I'm going to go, what's on the birth certificate? And she actually sat down and called from the United States, overseas, every single person listed with that name in the phone book. And they all came back and said, sorry, most of them were still in their 20s or 30s. If it's true that my mother was 13 years old, the other question I have is, her being 13 years old and being with a 24-year-old man in the United States, even in the 60s, I would still think somebody in a hospital would say, why is an adult man with a child? Why are we not questioning that? Well, because we question it today. In 2013, we will question if an adult man is with a child having children. So it can't.
Maybe you were born at home, though. Maybe it was a home birth situation.
Well, even if it was, then you have to go to my brother, who was next in line, being, 14 or 14 years old. If she was 14 when she had my brother, 9.5 months later, then why then didn't someone stand up and say, and then I brought this up to Tracy, and Tracy said, Michael, honestly, on some reservations, there are things that happen. And she says, don't be surprised if you ever find out that your mother was your mother, but, it could be that she was molested. Remember, we don't know. It could be she was whisked off a reservation to have you guys and then taken away.
And maybe the man wasn't even present when she gave birth,
Right, because it would have been an embarrassment for a 13-year-old girl to have a child at 13 years old.
And you have to remember the residential schools. A lot of the churches and stuff like that took advantage of children. So when they came back, a lot of them were doing the same thing in their own communities.
Right.
So
I don't even remember being in school. I mean, me and him both, not even remember. All we remember is being in a foster home for about 6 months, and then we were gone again. And that's all we remember. We have lost memory, and a lot of people believe that because something traumatic happened to you guys at a very young age, and they believe it's because you were probably ripped out of your mother's arms and gone.
Yeah, you repressed them. Yeah, you do repress them. Have you guys done hypnosis? I mean, I know it sounds weird, but...
No, we haven't, and I've tried to really stay away from that because, to me, I have had my mind played with so much, and I'm not saying anything wrong about counseling. Counseling's good, it works for people, but when I'm being told, hey, we need to... They did a lot of things to me that you wouldn't believe. I mean, they took these little pins and kind of sliced up my back and put stuff on it to see what I was being allergic to. They came back with nothing. The Solas put me on diets where I couldn't have sugar as a child. They made me eat homemade peanut butter. They made me eat homemade bread because they thought I was hyper because all Michael wanted to do is run through the woods and play along with me. They didn't like that because they couldn't keep their eye on me. And that's where I spent most of my time. To this day, I'll tell you right now, to this day, I still find solitude in being in the mountains by myself. If I'm by myself, I'm doing good. And when you have people who are messing with your mind, it's me messing with your mind. You can't do this. You have to do this. Read the Bible. We were told to read that Bible every single day. There was times I was locked in my room for more than a month, where I could only come out to eat and only come out to go to the bathroom. Other than that, you were in for a month. Feel a little jail cell. Did not come out. And that's the way we were treated. And really, that's why I left. I mean, I had enough. And, I left at a very young age. I was not with that foster family for more than 5 or 6 years. And then my brother was really, when I talked to him, he said, I held a grudge against you because you didn't take me with you. And I said,
bless his heart.
Yeah, he left 2 years after me. And that's what he started. When he took off from Vermont because it was so cold there, he didn't like the cold. And he left, and his journey brought him basically to Pine Ridge where he lived. And then he just started his journey. He's done very well. I'm very proud of him for not staying here. I always wondered where he was. I always heard stories from the foster family that he was in jail and he was locked up. And, there's no way to find him. Nobody knows where he is. In reality, they knew right where he was. They just never let us get together. After 12 years, we found each other. And so that's a big part. It makes me happy. I mean, if you go to our Facebook, our emails, if you have any information, I would appreciate it. If you look at our pictures, there's no doubt in my mind who we are. And I've always thought that the language, so I have a lot of people, the language is a clue to who you are. It's probably not the paper trail you got. It's going to be who can identify this and say, yes, we know what that is. And once that happens, which I'm very close with the help of Scott, I'm very close to knowing that, I now know. I feel good in my own skin, and I haven't felt like this for many years. If you have grown up as a child being told that you are this, and many years later, you find out you're not, you have to understand how many days I went through my life looking in a mirror going, I don't feel right. Something's wrong. Question who you are. I did that for a long time. When I found out from my brother, I finally was able to look in that mirror and say, now I know. Now I know. Why did you sit there? I'm a very hardcore man. That's what I call myself. I don't cry. I don't show a lot of emotions. I never have. But when I sit there and I watch something like Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and I start crying and I walk away, I say, well, man, what the heck am I crying for? Why am I doing that? I've watched movies where there are love stories with my wife and never cry. That type of thing, it struck me as odd, and I kind of just walked away from it. And I told my brother I couldn't watch it. I walked away. So it made me really understand as a person who I am. And, I have a great circle of friends, and now I can add more to that list that have come and said, we'll help you when nobody else would. Finally, it's opening up, and there's a lot of people I could go on who I could thank for helping me on my journey. And it's just one of those things that I do stand tall. I do stand proud because I know in my heart who I am.
Yeah, it's all, this is all part of the genocide that is still ongoing today and, towards the Native people in the Americas, North and South. And, your experience is, you have your valid experience. Everything that's happened to you is, there's been a lot of horror that has happened to you. And I definitely want you to know, and other listeners out there to know, that Michael Sola isn't alone. There are thousands of children that have gone through these experiences. But I also want to bring up that there are thousands of Indian people of mixed blood who have also gone through similar circumstances. And when you were talking, Michael, about how you wake up every day and you're waking up every day and not really knowing exactly who you are, or that you had these different concepts in your mind about who you are, most Indian people in the United States today kind of have this same dilemma. Now, there are Indians that were born and raised on Indian reservations out west who are pretty solid with their identity, and they have a tendency to fit the stereotypical Hollywood Indian, dark skin, long black hair, and what have you. But there are Indians out there of mixed ancestry that some look white, some look black, and people like that, and I identify with people like that because I look white. And I was raised with my heritage. I was told what tribe I came from a very early age. I mean, I started asking questions at the age of 4, and it's just been who I am. It's a part of my life. But even so, when you have this outside dominant society trying to tell you, no, you're white, you're not Indian, you don't look Indian, or oh, that tribe's extinct, or oh, you're just listening to mythology that's being passed around from family to family, or you're not federally recognized, so you're not really Indian, or you don't have the right blood quantum, or you're not good enough for this, or it's always something. You're not man enough, you're not woman enough, you're not white enough, you're not black enough, you're not brown enough, you're not Indian enough, it's nothing is ever enough. And so we're barraged with all of these outsider negative messages on us. And I'll tell you, they will never kill our spirit, because that is a gift of our native ancestors, that our spirit is strong, and we know deep down inside of our heart and our minds who we are, and that's something that they will never be able to take from us, no matter what they do, no matter what laws are passed, no matter what hate group pops up its ugly head and decides to try to go after Indian people, whether full blood or mixed blood or whatever kind of label that they want to try to work with. But that genocide is something that's still ongoing today, and these adoptions are in the definition of genocide, because when you have a power base that is has authority over everyone, and they go after a specific community, and they try to prevent births, or they try to shift the children out of their community into outsider communities to strip them of their culture and language and heritage, that is part of the definition of genocide, the international definition of genocide.
Very well said.
I wanted to get a story out there today also while we were doing this interview, because I think it kind of fits in with the general message of this interview. And Laurie Tabor, you had told me a story about 2 or 3 years ago about some family that lived on a mountain, I think in Kentucky.
Yep.
And
there on the West Virginia border.
Can you tell us about this family and what happened and what occurred later on?
Absolutely. To protect not just myself, but this family, I'm not going to use names, because honestly, it's a very, very frightening, genocidal, scary story, and I know that they have seen and fear repercussion, and I don't want the same thing to happen. So for that reason, I'm going to analogously use the name Smith, because they need protection still to this day because of what happened to them. So there was this Smith family, and that's not their real name. I'm just using that name for today's purposes of telling this tale. There was a mother and a father and 4 children. They had 3 daughters and 1 son, and the father, Smith, worked for a coal mining company for many, many years. He came from a generation of people who did that kind of work. And his wife, Mrs. Smith, was a domesticated woman. She stayed at home with the children, and they gardened, and they lived on their land. he worked, coal mining families didn't make a whole lot, especially when you lived initially as a young couple in a coal camp. And they did that. They lived in a coal camp. But at some point, he went up the ranks in the coal company and doing his work, his mining work, and he was able to buy, land, and then add on and buy more land, and then buy more land over the years. At which point, they built a house on this land, and that was their home, and they owned it. They owned the land, they owned the house, and they were raising their children on this land. Like many people who worked in the mining industry, he was rotten with health problems, and he died prematurely. The father did. Mr. Smith died prematurely because of this sort of, that black lung coal mining cancer thing that happens to so many people. And he died. Just a few years later, like literally, the mother, the same thing happened to her, and she died. And so these 4 children were orphaned. They were staying and living in their family home, having a familiarity with this home place of theirs. And they still would, cook amongst themselves and take care of each other and protect one another. They didn't have family that came in and took care of them or lived with them or, made sure that they had meals or made sure that their clothes were clean. They just basically, as young children, ages 6 through 12, took care of each other and lived together after both of their parents had deceased. And so they would, get up and go, pack a little potato and walk to school and, did what children did, and they played and they worked around the house. They cleaned, they did their own laundry, and they self-subsisted for some time. I don't know the exactitudes of how long these 4 children that were orphans lived together alone, but at some juncture, people in the neighborhood and people from the mining company got wind the children were still living in the family home place on the mountain side, and that they were, and that no one was there. And ultimately what tragically happened was some men, 4 of them, in suits, dark suits, hats, they all had fedoras on. They came to, walking up the, mountain pass and came to their homestead and greeted, for lack of a better way of putting it, that's not even the right word, approached the children in the home and basically said, you need to leave here. And they said, no, this is our home, this is our, the boys spoke up, this is our home, this is our parents' home, our parents bought this, our parents own it, look, here's the deed, we own it, it's family owned, and we live here, and we're going to stay here, and we still go to school, and we take care of our land, and, our crops, and we do our thing, and, you big men just leave us alone. And, children can't fight that fight with grown adults, and these men took advantage of the fact that they were children. They accosted the children. They tied all 4 of them to a tree in the yard, like literally, physically, bodily tied the 4 children around this tree in the yard. They took the paper that was the deed for the property, for the house and the land and all of that, and they burned the house, everything, burned everything. Took the doll out of the one little girl, she was like 6 or 7, took the doll out of her hand and threw it in the fire and burnt the whole thing and told the kids to leave, to take off, and to never come back, and took off. And the children were left with literally the clothes on their back and nothing. They didn't have a pot, they didn't have a pan, they didn't have a bed, they didn't have a house, they didn't have parents, they didn't have family that they knew of, nothing. And they went into the woods. They didn't know what else to do. They went into the woods, and they lived in the woods for a number of weeks. I don't know exactly how many weeks. As the story was told to me from one of the little girls, who's now a grown woman, who's actually on her deathbed, we speak, with lung-type cancer. cancer ailment, just like her parents. But as I was told the story, they lived in the woods for a number of weeks and just took shelter with each other and huddled together and made a lean-to and lived in the woods and dug roots and ate what they could find and drank water from a spring and made their way. But at some point, family heard that these children that were living here in these woods in this little mountain area, family got wind and heard about the house being burnt down and heard about the children being in the woods, and they went in search of them, went in search of the children, and they found the children, literally the four of them, huddled together in the woods, having lived there alone for a number of weeks. And they brought them, out of Kentucky into Ohio, and they raised them and took care of them and clothed them and fed them and nurtured them and raised them to adulthood. And at some point, this was a distant family member that raised them. They called her Granny. She wasn't actually their granny. She was actually their aunt. She was their mother's sister. And she raised these four children, even though they called her Granny, much like Michael calls that woman that he was talking about earlier, Granny. It's someone you look up to. It's someone that's an elder. It's someone who nurtured and took care of you. And, even being ripped away from their home, they still were with some family member and were raised. And, they really suffered emotionally for most of their lives, at that great loss and that tragedy, and seeing, the pictures of their parents and their moms embroidered little pillowcases and everything being burned up in that fire.
And this was a native. This was a Native American.
Yes, they're native. Yes. Absolutely, Native American family. Beautiful, beautiful Native people, and they, as adults, went back to the family home place to visit their parents' graves and to see that land, and they hired an attorney to get rights to their land because they still owned it. Their parents were the last deedful owners of the land, and the attorney was killed. And then they hired another attorney, and that attorney was shot at, and they were threatened, and their cars were shot at, and they tried legally to get the rights and the deed or a duplicate deed or something to their family home place and land. And they were always shot down figuratively and literally. And it just became way too dangerous, and there's not a single attorney. Last time I talked to the one who was the youngest of the girls, the last time I talked to her, she said that there was not one single attorney anywhere, anywhere within 4 states that would even touch their case, would take their case, would do anything, because they were so fearful, because the land is being mined for all of its resources and has been for years. Because there are there are natural resources there that are worth just countless, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they're mining off that land, and that's what has happened to their family, Native American family land. And that's why they came in and burned the children and shoot them out. And that land is being mined and mined and mined and mined and mined, and all the natural resources are illegally being gotten because that deed was burned when the children were tied to the tree. And they have no recourse, and nobody will, could legally assist them because it was just too dangerous. It's big money. I don't know the exactitudes of the money, situation, but I can imagine it's a lot, when you own a whole lot of land where there are resources there. And so, like I said, the youngest, there are only 2 of them that are surviving of those 4 children. So that's the situation with them. And like I said, the youngest one, she's at the throes of death now. You know, she's got the same ailment that I'm sure maybe living near there. I don't know how that works, you know, but I can imagine those, you know, mining coal town companies and all of the fumes and all chemicals and everything like that have wreaked havoc on many, 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 many people's lives, and they all have died of the same thing. And so that's their story. That's the short version. And
this is a story that is often repeated throughout the Southeast and even into the Midwest and even further out west. There's a lot of mixed blood Indian families all across the United States who are members of tribes that are not federally recognized. They're not a member of a federally recognized tribe. Therefore, they have no voice. They have no recourse or redress of their grievances. And I often wonder how many generations will pass between, you know, the turn of last century until the future. How many generations have to pass by before justice is done for our peoples? There's so many stories out there that can be told about injustice and genocide and murders and house burnings, and the list goes on and on. And a lot of our people are called fakes, frauds, and wannabes. We're called all kinds of names. We're given all sorts of nasty, racist names, and we have this genocide that's in effect over us, trying to suppress us, trying to gag us and keep us from having a voice, to keep the truth from surfacing. But, you know, you can't keep the truth hidden forever. The earth always finds a way to have that truth spoken. And, you know, I hope and pray that at some point that this family that had their home confiscated, that, you know, someone in their family will at some point have some kind of justice that will come out of all that tragedy. Just like with Michael Sola, you know, I am always praying for our families and all Native American people, that these injustices that we live with and that we've gone through, and the racism that we face on a daily basis, that this will stop, and that people's eyes will be open, and that their ears will be open, and that they'll hear and see and finally understand that you can't judge a book by its cover. You know, just because someone looks white or someone looks black or someone looks brown or red or whatever in people's minds is somehow a negative about our Native American ancestry, that their minds will be open, and that these things will stop, these tragedies will stop, because I know for myself that I don't want to. I'm tired of hearing these horribly tragic stories that happen to our people. I want those things to not happen to the future generations. I want the children of the future to be free from that hate and that oppression. And I think that by doing shows like this and presenting these stories and educating people and helping people to link up to whatever information it is that they might need to somehow move beyond and get above all of this hate and rage and evilness that happens to our people, I'm hoping that, you know, by doing this, that we will begin to break through these walls and break some of these stereotypes down to where it's nothing anymore, to where it's something that's in the past, but then we have, you know, justice and hope to look forward to.
It's all about greed. It's all about greed. People are greedy. What did Peggy say? Cousin Peggy, you can't fix stupid. And that's just the reality, you know. But you're right. There are countless people. I've heard stories and stories and stories and stories, talking to people genealogically, talking to people that are native descendants, and it's just pitiful. It is pitiful. I mean, to think that so many children were taken from their family, tribe, and reservations and just, you know, sold. There's the money factor again.
Yeah, like they're nothing, like they have no emotion, like they're not humans. And
trying to strip them of their identity and their name and their culture and their family and their language and their homes and their birthrights, you know? I mean,
and when I say I'm tired of hearing those stories, I'm not saying I don't want to ever hear anyone's story again. I'm just saying that I want to help those situations that present themselves at any opportunity that I get, because I feel like that's what I'm meant to do. And I think that you know, we have to reach a point of breaking through this apathy that exists in our society. Everyone's so apathetic about everything. Apathetic about religion. Apathetic about social justice. Because, you know, people have worked so hard, you know, throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s to reach a level of changing our society through social justice protests and things like that. And they've hit their head against the wall, and you know, there have been some good changes that have occurred, and there have been some wonderful heroes in the social justice movements, you know, in the Native American community, the African American community, the European American community. There have been some great strides that have been had over time, but we still have a long way to go. I mean, we have 500 years.
Not quite enough.
Yeah, we have 500 years of oppression and genocide to overcome. And, you know, I really hope that people don't get into a reverse racial mentality to hate whitey, you know, because there were a lot of really strong, good European people that helped in the Indian community and the African community. I mean, I have white family that you know, were abolitionists, and those white families really took their lives into their own hands to be an abolitionist back in the day. You know, they because they hung people for that. They hung people for helping Native people. And, you know, when our families started intermarrying, that was even worse. I mean, you could go to jail for interracial marriage. And, you know, the kids shipped off into orphanages, and they were even selling Indian children as slaves as recently as Esperanza, 1880 something. What was that picture you were showing me about the Mexica that were being sold in like the 1890s or something like that?
Yaqui Indians.
Wow. Sad.
I had a question from the audience for Michael. Is he still on the line?
Yes.
Okay. There was a listener that asked, he knows you, and he knows Joanne Spotted Bear, and he asked, what about the adoptive parents? I believe what he was asking, if they were able to get any federal checks?
It's funny you say that, because I was just thinking about that when we were talking. Someone was mentioning money. They were receiving money. I don't know. This is how it happened that I knew about it. I was snooping around my dad's room. All kids do. You know, what's under dad's bed? What I want to know. And I was looking around, and I saw a piece of paper on his desk. My dad was very much a businessman. And it was basically from the state of New York. And it was, if I remember right, it was money that looked like he was being paid every month for me and my brother. which didn't make sense. I didn't think anything about it. I thought, hey, that's cool, because if he gets money, that means I can get a blue bicycle maybe. If I tell him I know that, I don't know. I didn't really pay attention until somebody else mentioned it to me. I think it was Tommy. We were talking about it. I said, yeah, he used to get money for the adoption. I know he did because I saw the receipts on his desk, basically showing that he was being paid X amount of dollars for me and my brother to be living in that household. And I really believe that's what basically brought down, made life easier, because I really look back then at a young family that had 6 children, 3 of them adopted, 3 of them natural. The things that we did as a family. We took 2 weeks off every year and went traveling. And not just, here and there. We were in Florida. We would go Michigan. We would go here. We would go there. We had brand new bicycles. We traveled. We did a lot. And I always wondered, how the heck, where's all the money? And I look at it back now and I said, well, take that. That's a good, amount of sum of money that he was probably getting for us boys. I only saw a receipt. It looked like a receipt. It's a black and white piece of paper. It mentioned, I think it was basically what it said was state of New York City, and it had a dollar amount, and had me and my brother. I saw me and my brother's name. I did not pay attention to it. I did not read the whole thing, because I was trying to get in and out of there before I got in trouble. I had to sneak into the bathroom to go see what was Dad's room. The dad's room was always a big mystery. The doors were always closed. We were not allowed in that room. But they had an adjoining bathroom, and I kind of popped the lock, and there I was gone. So that's how I found that out. That's really where I looked at. I know that his father was from Argentina, like I said. He was, I know that one of the relatives is the ambassador of Argentina, that they have land in Argentina. They're not a poor family. David Sola is not a poor family. He has a lot of money. I think that, long term, that this might have been very botched. I mean, money changes hands. David's father, when we went to their house, we would visit every year, sit down. They never spoke English. We did not have a clue what they were saying, so it always bothered me. And the grandfather very much reminded me of I want to say like a cartel person. Sit there in his big chair with his stuff of his history of being from Argentina. Big black glasses, and would never say a word, smoke a cigar. Grandmother was always in the kitchen making, traditional dishes for my father and his brother. That whole family comes from money. They're all from Maryland. They're from Argentina. David was under the impression that he was adopting Spanish-speaking children, and then when he got us home, found out we didn't speak or understand an ounce of Spanish. So that's really where I first saw a piece of paper that actually said something about money. But I never guessed. I mean, I figured, all Boston families probably got something. I don't know. I still don't know to this day.
Yeah, the state, when you're going through an adoption agency or into the foster care system, basically the state has custody of you. So it's kind of like when 2 people get a divorce and they have children, the father or the mother, whoever gets the children, the spouse that doesn't have the children has child support that they have to pay. Well, in the foster care system and adoption system, the state that you're in has custody of you, so in effect, they are the responsible party. So they do pay money to foster families and adoption families for a time, usually until the child is 18. I think I've heard them extend that to like 21 now, but that could be where that particular bit of money was coming from. However, if you're native, it is possible that the state could have been receiving funds, from a tribe. I guess the only way you'd probably find out for sure would be to hire a private investigator to delve into those records and find out for sure exactly what was going on.
Yep.
Wow, I didn't know that still happened after adoption happened.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was just a foster situation.
No, my parents adopted 4 children that had been in foster care in our home. Texas was paying my parents money. I don't know if it was every month or if it was annually or exactly how that worked, but I know that they were also getting medical coverage. Like if one of my adopted siblings needed medical care, then all those medical bills were paid by the state, even after adoption, because until they reach the age of 18 or 21, then the state is kind of like the
guardian or whatever.
The guardian or the parent that has to pay child support. So that's how that works.
Oh, here's money.
Money. But my parents didn't.
About money when it comes to children being adopted, taken away from.
My parents didn't do that for money, though. My parents, when they got into doing foster care in 1980, that was something that my mother felt called to do. She's a Christian religious woman too, and her and my father agreed and decided that they wanted to open our home up and help children that were being abused. And like I was telling Laurie last night, we had over 80 children in and out of our home between 1980 and 1992, and I've heard the gamut of child abuse. I've seen it. It's horrendous stories. Stories I still can't fathom. When I hear the stories about child sex abuse, it doesn't make sense in my mind. I actually can't. I don't understand it, and I don't want to understand it, to be honest. But I've heard and seen a lot involving child abuse. Having our home open to foster care, and the system just chews these kids up, and most kids in the foster care system don't ever get adopted, especially after the age of 1 or 2 years old. And so there are a lot of children that go into the custody of the state, and the state just messes kids up. They have kids going in and out of homes. They have abuse happening in orphanages and in these foster care homes.
And in the institutions they put them in, like Michael was talking about, how he was put on psychiatric meds, put on medications because they thought he was crazy or wild or whatever. I worked in the mental health system in Ohio, and there used to be a facility here in Cincinnati called, now it just flew out of my brain. It was the Children's Mental Health Facility, and they closed it down back in the, I want to say, early 90s, like right around 90, 92, that time frame. But the children that lived there, a lot of them were foster familied repeatedly in and out of the foster care system, and they were unadoptable. It actually said that on some of their records, that they were unadoptable, and they were sent there, to Mill Creek. It was called Mill Creek Psychiatric, and that was for mentally ill children, and the vast majority of those children that were there at Mill Creek Psychiatric here in Cincinnati were victims of abuses from foster care system.
Yeah, and every child, you will find out, if you do just even a little bit of searching about foster care and the system, every kid, every single last kid, whether they have a problem or not, they put them on drugs. They put them on some kind of psychotropic, like for ADHD, hyperactivity, and things like that. And these kids are just kids. They're not hyperactive. They're just children. But they still put them on all these, horrible drugs and pharmaceuticals that completely mess you up. They mess your metabolism up. They mess your mind up. They make, if you didn't have a psychiatric problem to begin with, you will after you take that medication for 10 years, It's
pretty tragic. It really is. But yeah, the they do put them on meds, and they do ship them into mental health facilities and take them to and fro with shrinks, and it's crazy. It's crazy itself, you know what I mean? The children aren't the system that's perpetuating this is, you know. There need to be more advocates, but, you know, there are so many baby boomers, people born in the baby boom generation that were in, you know, that was a big time for, like Esperanza said, for children, you know, that were born in the 60s and 70s that were, you know, being shipped out, sent out, adopted out, fostered out, taken, you know. It happened a lot.
And just so that we don't give everyone the impression that foster care is all horror, there are some foster families that are good to children, that do a good thing for children, and that you know, they don't abuse them. My parents, our family never abused any child that came into our house. I mean, we were always taught growing up that children are sacred, and that, you know, you got to watch out for those kids. You have to protect children because they can't protect themselves. They have no one to protect them except for the adults and the older people around them. And
I'm gonna agree with that, because I did end up going back into foster care when I left the Solas because I was still a child, and I ended up taken in by a family up north that really knew that, you know, I knew they were getting money for me, but that lady there turned around and didn't need the money. She told me up front, I don't need the money. We're going to take you and get you the things you need. Well, they made everything their son got, I got. Everything from great education to he got a snowmobile or a motorcycle, I got one. He got sneakers, I got one. I wanted to go out to the movies with my friends, they gave me money. They treated me like their son. I was very happy there. Then again, you know, they found out that, you know, the Solas claimed I had these issues of wanting to wander off. And Alan, who was the plumber, that's how I learned plumbing, took me and brought me up in the mountains, up north, and turned me loose. He said, go, see you later, have a good time. And I took off, had a great time, came back down, and he was like, did you enjoy it? Yeah. You know, that felt home.
That's wonderful.
Let's go. And that's really, you know, how I really became more in tune with myself as far as the Solas, you know, that's the beginning, that's where I started. But I ended up in a great home with a great family, and that's why I don't hold ill will. I could very much hold ill will against foster families, but I know there's some out there that are very good. And if I could ever adopt a child, just like my own children, I've never hit them. I would not hit them. I don't yell, I don't shoot them. I would not do that because I was raised like that. My brother's the same way. He has 3 children in his home right now, and they're great kids. He's a great father, but we weren't brought up like that. The tables could have turned when we could have became very violent people towards our children, and we weren't, which is great because we both knew and understood that we would never do what happened to us to our children.
Wow, what a story. It's unbelievable. You made it through it, too.
Yeah, you know, and that's the most important thing for anybody listening, is that, you know, if you are in foster care, things sometimes don't look great, things can be very grim, but always look ahead, because those answers will come to you, whether it's from your grandfathers, your grandmothers. Those things will come. I have made, without any help, you know, except for the second foster family I was in, a great life for myself. I've never wanted, and I still don't to this day. I could, you know, tomorrow find out that who we are. I'm not asking for anything. I don't want anything. That's not me. I've done very well. I have a great wife. I have a great circle of friends. I have a great boss, great job, and life is good. I have my brother. That's the most important part of this journey, is that now my brother's around. And that really is part of family. And And we'll reach together. They never find out. Who knows? But you know what? I know now who I am. And I know now who he is. And I know that we should continue, even though our journeys are two separate roads on this path. And we should cross our paths once in a while and discuss what's going on and do the things that we want to do as Native children. We hike. Me and my brother will go up in the woods and we'll run around. We're 40 years old, 47 years old. We're both 47. We'll run around them mountains like crazy, sneaking up on deer. We love doing that. That's something else. That's something else that, you know, we've always questioned, hey, where'd you learn how to do that? I don't know. It's just in me. Well, yeah, because of who we are. This is something we do all the time. We love to have fun in the woods. We just run around. I mean, eventually someone's probably going to call the police and say, hey, there's a bunch of Indians running around in the woods. But until then, we're going to continue doing that.
Yeah, there's nothing like being outdoors. I mean, you know, listening to the life that is going on out of doors. And it's unfortunate that in America, in our society, that so many people are locked up in their apartments or their houses, and there's a disconnect about, you know, nature and what's actually occurring outside, just outside the door. But I think that times are changing. I really think that people are becoming more aware of how important it is to get fresh air and some sun, and, you know, go out into, you know, a forest or a national park or state park and just, you know, kind of just relax and unwind and have a picnic or just enjoy the outdoors. And
there's a lot. There's a lot. Not to interrupt. There's a lot. If you really think about this, learn from the winged ones, the four-leg things that crawl. We can learn. They have messages. They are our teachers. They are our providers. And if you take that time to put down that remote control or the video game and take a walk outside, it will blow your mind, because I've done it. Done it since I was a child. I continue to do it. I've seen things that I can never explain, but they're in my memory, and that's where they'll stay. And it's that much fun. And that, to me, is more entertaining than a TV show or a video game. Is being able to go outside and become one with really who our ancestors used to look at, from the clothing, the food, the utensils, the weapons that the four-legged truly have provided, our grandfathers and grandmothers have provided for us. That's where it starts.
Oh yeah, see.
See? Did you just say that in Spanish?
I say it in all kinds of languages.
Did you ever learn Spanish,
yes.
Michael?
Me?
Yeah, did you? Were you forced to learn the Spanish language?
Nope, I couldn't do it. I was in, it's funny to say that, because me and my brother were both in the Spanish, they had enrolled us in the Spanish class, and we could not do it, so I think it was a week later they pulled us out.
Oh my.
But I couldn't, now all the other children, we're the only two who could not speak that language. We just never have, can't do it. I've talked to my brother, and he said, I can't pronounce it, I don't understand it. We just can't do it. It's, you know, so I'm kind of glad that that's happened in a way, that it wasn't, you know, really forced on me, because I could have lost what I do remember. And that remembering was just getting in the way of them trying to teach me that language, because all the Sola children know Spanish because they all go to Argentina. And they had tried to put us into that, and we just couldn't get it. I still can't get it. I can't roll my R's. I'm not good at that.
No R for you, huh?
Yeah. As close as I get to Spanish is Taco Bell. So, I just want to say, at this time, you know, thank you so much for all this, and you know, to everybody. I mean, it's really been helpful. I'm glad that I was very nervous at first, but to be able to get this off my chest for people to listen to it and really look at really what's going on. I mean, it's not just me, like Scott had said. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of Native people walking this earth that need to go home. Mm-hmm. And that's really, you know, I find it hard there are mothers and fathers out there going, I have a 47-year-old son out there, a 50-year-old son, a 60-year-old son out there. I don't know where he is.
What is your birth date? What's your birth date? Announce it.
1/15/67, January 15th, 1967. My brother was November 23rd, 1967.
And your sister that passed?
And this is the one that's going to get you. She was born January 15th, 1968. And you're going to sit there and go, that's impossible. I'm going to tell you, you're exactly right.
Yay, a Capricorn, just like me.
Yeah. So, but, I mean, this is part of why, I had talked to Scott and really decided to do this show, because I need people to be aware, even if nothing comes of it. At least people listen and they're out there and they're aware that the person you're working with right next to you could be a foster child, could be a Native American child that is missing. I mean, there are children missing. And the biggest thing to me, being indigenous, is we all need to go home. We all need to have that for the ceremonies, for the prayers, for the teachings. Because if we don't continue to teach our children, then we have done nothing but really have lost what has been given to us by our ancestors. There's going to be a time, if we don't teach our children, if we don't find our children, that those children's children are going to be the ones who tell the story. And if they don't know them, they cannot tell them.
That's right.
That's so true. That's so true. So your name is Michael, but you're not Michael. Do you feel at your core you're not a Michael?
No, I'm not a Michael. I'm not. I mean, my brother's not either. We're not. That's, I would love to find out. I would. I mean, that's the fact. I would love more than anything to find out who we are. But knowing where we come from is just as helpful, because that means now I can go back and do the things that our ancestors have done. Because if you look at that way of life, if you look at it was a very easy, possible, and it still is possible to this day. The problem is, in my eyes, is that there's too much in society going on right now with computers. These digital, I mean, I've got friends of mine now who hold cell phones now, they're big as a computer. I don't know how the heck you hold it up to your ear, but that's what they got. There's a lot going on. When I was a child, I played in the woods because I had nothing else to do. I could go in the woods and see squirrels and deer and bear and moose. And now you ask a child, hey, is that a deer standing in the field? They'll look at it and go, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Because they're not being educated. If you look at Native American history, children knew. Children fished. They hunted. They played. They were being children. Now we take our children and we put them in a bus. We send them off to school, play sports, and they become competitive, and they get on the video games, and they do violent things. And that's what we have taught our children. But if we reverse that and teach our children of our culture, then things are okay. And that's what people really need to look at. People really need to look, Native American people really need to stand up, I'm going to say it, and yell out loud and say we're proud, and you're not going to put us down anymore. That's what needs to happen in this country. I'm sorry I said it, but that's the way it is.
Don't be sorry.
Well,
because it's exactly right.
Back at one. Full circle, back at one, out in nature, like our ancestors. And kids are happiest when they're doing that. They really are. I know that from my own children. When we go creeking and we go out in the woods and we're on private property and worried about getting shot, they never have more fun.
Well, that's my son. And my son, he's 23 years old. He's a great kid. A great kid. Couldn't ask for a better son. That's all we talk about. He'll call me up and show me pictures and send me funny little quotes about deer and turkeys and bear. He'll call me and say, hey, Dad, are you hunting this year? Hey, I just caught some fish. Because I brought my son up away from that computer, took him into the woods when he was 3 years old, and made him carry his little backpack with his little bow and arrow, and we would hike up in the woods, and we would scout, we would make a fire, and we'd cook deer meat on an open fire, and we'd hike all over the place and come back down, and that little boy would lay down and go to sleep. And he never, ever forgot that. He never forgot. And he still, to this day, doesn't do those stupid things that you hear about. He's in the woods. If I call my son right now and put him on your radio show, I guarantee he's sitting there fishing or he's out in the woods somewhere playing. At a 23-year-old, 4-year-old age, instead of racing cars and doing violent things, looking at what really life is about. And that's what life is.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. That's cool. Well, I hope you give Scott, or Scott gives you my contact information, because I do want to get the birth certificate information from you, and I do want to try and be assistive and help you in your search, because I think the answers are there. I think we're going to find your answers.
Yes, and I will get all that information to Scott. Call him again later on, probably this evening or tomorrow, and get that all off to you. And again, I mean, thank you, everybody, even everybody listening. I appreciate everything. Just remember, we're indigenous.
That's right. I don't know more.
I don't know more.
Hey, that's right.
So at this time, I'm going to say goodbye. And Scott, I can't thank you enough from my heart. And everybody, Laurie, everybody, thank you. And pray.
Thank you. Have a good day. And I think that, Esperanza, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out. Thank you for sharing your story. And, Native Voices United is a radio station for all people to come out on if they have a problem, or if something's troubling their heart, or if they just want to give us an update on what's going on with their life, anything. We are always welcome to have you here on the radio station. And I hope that you do find your family. I hope you find your extended family. And I hope that, the links that I put up there will help lead you back home. I mean, I can't do a lot, but with whatever I have here at my fingertips, I'm going to share. Also, I just wanted to name that book again, just in case anyone is interested in getting the book. It's called The Dispossessed by Jeffrey York, and you can get it on Amazon. I picked one up, I think, for like $3. And I think maybe $2 shipping or whatever they charge on Amazon. So, I mean, they have them in used form if anybody's interested in getting that book. But it's a really good book if you want to hear the stories of the First Nations and Métis children that were brought over to the States on this side and taken into adoptive homes and things like that.
Awesome work.
And Laurie, did you have anything to add real quick before we end the show?
Not really. I want to know that R surname. I want to know that. I want you to get Michael in touch with me so that I can get some of that information, so that I can start digging from my end.
Will do. Well, I think that's going to do us for today, or at least for this particular interview. It was really good talking with everyone, Esperanza, Laurie, Michael. I hope that all three of you guys have a really good day. It was great. Thank you everyone for this opportunity. Thank you audience for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at United Native Voices or Esperanza on Facebook, Scott Preston Collins on Facebook, Laurie Tabor Muise on Facebook. And I can't remember Michael's name on Facebook right now at the moment, but
they can email me if they'd like to do, and I'll give them a direct link to my Facebook. And my email address is msola, SLA, 1967 at yahoo.com.
Awesome. All right then. Well, everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to y'all again another time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.